There's so many times I can remember showing a buyer a house that they called on, and then they were like, well, I want to see some other ones. And then, like, in my heart knowing, like, this is the best house. Same thing, the opposite way. I was like, this is the best house you're going to get.
Yeah.
And I can remember after showing like 30, 40 houses, they were like,
right.
Is that first one still available? I'm like, no, it's gone.
It's been gone. Right. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Hustle on Purpose. I'm GT Ikard, and today we have with us Zeke Tanner. Zeke, how are you doing?
Doing great, brother.
Good, man. Thanks a lot for coming out today. I know you a little bit. We went to school together back in the day, and we've talked real estate over the years. But just for the people that don't know you, give us a little bit of your background, what you do, how you got here, all that stuff.
Yeah. So Zeke, of course, been married for a few years. I got a 15-month-old baby, so
congratulations.
Living life, having a blast. Started in real estate back in 2013, so this will be about a decade now.
Congratulations on that as well.
Thank you. It's been a journey, that's for sure. But I grew up in real estate. My mom and dad were in real estate sales, so I can remember as a kid literally doing door hangers for them. Residential sales, as a little kid, I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to do this. But it's amazing when you say never, things happen. Because once I got into college, I had a feeling that I was like, yeah, I'm going to go into real estate. I graduated. I went to Arkansas State, graduated in 3 years with a finance degree. And I actually went into the car business for about a year and kind of knew that I was going to go into real estate eventually, but I just didn't want to do it immediately. And after a year of it, I can remember calling my mom and saying, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm getting into real estate. And she's like, well, what are you going to do? I was like, I don't know what type of real estate I'm doing yet, but, I know you've worked hard and I've seen hard times, but it's got to be better than what I'm doing right now. And I loved the car business. It was a lot of fun, but flexibility for family has always been a huge thing. And I saw my parents work really hard, but they were able to have, quite a bit of that. And so moved back, and the rest is the beginning, I guess.
Right. I saw a video the other day, and your story kind of made me think about it, and my story does as well. And it was this evolution specialist, somebody that studies different aspects of evolution. And he was like, we've evolved to be people that from the age of 13 to about 23, everything your parents do and say seems like complete nonsense.
Yes.
You're wired to, and he came at it from the evolutionary perspective. And he was like, my theory is the reason behind that is, so that is your prime, like, reproductive age. It's so that you leave your village, you go and do whatever. And then, but you wake up one day in that 23 to 24-year-old age, and you realize at 13, immediately, like, one day your parents make no sense. And then at like 23 to 24, all of a sudden your parents are back to being smart and making a bunch of sense, right?
100%.
And I think a lot of people relate to that, especially people with entrepreneurial parents.
Yeah.
You grow up and your life is consumed a lot of times by that business that your parents are in, and you grow this like hatred for it, almost
like
in a way.
Disdain, a hatred, almost, yeah.
Right. But then a lot of people come back around and you're like, you know what? Like, that business makes a lot of sense, and I think I might like it.
Yep.
So I hear a lot of that in your story, and like imagining even just the little that I do know you, imagining you in something other than real estate is kind of hard for me.
It'd be hard.
Yeah.
I think just even part of looking at it from seeing your parents do it and then you doing it, it's like a lot of people will go into the same path, but I really, even though I'm in the same field, and I contribute learning almost everything I know from my mom, because I did work for her selling real estate for like 2 years. But I can't imagine doing anything else, really.
Yeah.
Just it's given us so much flexibility. And I think the biggest thing that especially pushed me away, my dad died my freshman year of college, and I can just remember like they had some grind years where just like there was like 6 or 7 years where that's kind of like all they did was work in all reality. And when he got his like diagnosis, I can just remember the only thing he wanted to do was go have fun and play and experience life. And especially in my early 20s, I took a lot of that to heart. And so anything I was doing, I was like, if this isn't bringing me, and it really is like, if this isn't going to bring me pleasure or time to spend with friends or family, I'm not going to do it. And obviously there's some negatives to that, as I've learned, as I've gotten older.
Right.
But it's just like, hey, if I don't think this is going to send me towards whatever my goal is in the moment, which is either hang out with friends or just enjoy life, I'm not going to do it.
And ideally, you have both of it, right? Where you're able to do something that's providing for you short term and long term, and building for you and your family that you have now, but also providing that freedom. Because for me, I mean, my story is kind of similar. So I grew up in a retail business that my parents owned, and was there all every day after school, on the weekends, and you grow this kind of like disdain for the business, because you see all the other kids doing extracurricular activities, and you're stuck cleaning the glass inside of showcases and all this kind of stuff. I appreciate all of that stuff greatly now that I'm older, because I can see the work ethic that it instilled in me, and all the I mean, it molded me into who I am today. I'm thankful for it. But another experience that I got out of that is my dad passed away when I was 12, and that business was very much his dream and his ambition and his desire. And my mom was there to be supportive, and she worked in the business, but it was very much like his thing. And he was the driving force behind that. And so once my dad passed away, I got to see that shift, and my mom being stuck with this business as their primary source of income, but it was never, my dad was always the driving force. And she was kind of stuck with this. And once he was gone, it left my mom in this tough spot, right? We had a lifestyle we were accustomed to.
Bills that had to be paid, man.
Right. Yeah. And I didn't fully appreciate all that. I probably still don't, all that she went through with that. Real estate for me has been a way to build a business that if I were to get hit by a bus tomorrow, or get some kind of terrible terminal diagnosis or whatever, my wife won't be left with a business in the same way my mom was. It'll be a business that is able to run without me, or has a value that's easier to quantify and be sold off, as opposed to the retail business my mom was left with.
So I know you feel that same pressure that I did, because even on the same, granted, when my dad died, my mom was the face of the business, so everything was able to still run. But I can remember in the 08-09 crash, I'd started at my senior year, I started working for Val, and part of the reason I really wanted to become even a real estate investor was because when 08-09 happened, I can remember my mom and dad literally, they took the credit card and they said, if it ain't gas, there's nothing going on this card. But it was at the same time, I was working for Val, and dude, he was still spending like I'd never seen. And because he had multiple sources of income, essentially what it came down to.
Right.
So he had rental property. And I mean, I can remember cleaning out nasty units for him and painting or doing yards or whatever needed to be done. But it was just really cool to see his other side of the business that I'd never really thought of in real estate. But that's really what spurred me into wanting investing, because it's like I saw that uncertainty that my parents experienced from the sales side, we'll call it the retail side.
Right.
And I think you've got to have a little bit of everything, a little bit, different sources. But it was just one of those aha moments of, okay, there's going to be downturns. There's going to be winners in business and life. But on the, quote, financial side, this is one way to, quote, mitigate that risk.
Yeah. And you get into real estate, and typically everybody has their way that they got in.
Yep.
Right? There's pros and cons to going only deep down that one path.
Yep.
I try to encourage people to take that road pretty far, get really good at something, get to where that's paying your bills and whatever. But there's also a lot of benefits in trying to go wider. It's never going to hurt you to be able to perform in real estate in multiple ways. And it's hard for me to explain that to people that aren't in real estate, but you have to tiptoe that balance once again of like going wider, but not spreading yourself too thin.
Yep.
Because you can do it. I mean, I could talk to 1,000 different real estate investors, and they all have their own ways.
Oh my gosh!
And they can all make it work, right? But if you can find ways that cover all of those contingencies, can you have some long-term rentals that keep you afloat when like the market's doing bad? And you can tap into that equity when like rates tank and use that to like get into something different.
I mean, you're literally preaching to the choir. So there's been twice that, and I feel like hopefully I've learned, but I would basically I would find my new niche, whatever that was, and I'd let the old one die just because I was like, well, this one's making more. And, there were some times where it got thin. I mean, I've been doing it for a decade, and I can remember thinking, why in the world did I let that revenue stream die? It's because I was like, well, this one's better. And it was.
Right.
But if you do it long enough, you'll realize that like there's winters and there's summers and springs in every niche, whatever that is, of that business. When I first started, I was selling real estate, and at this point I'd been doing it for about a year and a half. And my mom had me running around with like $600,000 or $700,000 buyers, which if you don't make a lot of money on a $100,000 buyer. But I was young and hungry, and I was ready to get after it.
You got to get those knowledge through the transactions.
You got to get the knowledge through the transactions, through repetitions, going to bat.
Yep.
But I can remember there was one, we were actually not too far from here. I showed her a house. It was in Alexander. And I was like, it was a foreclosure. It was like $95,000. And I was like, if you'll just put like $5,000 in this, it'll be worth like $125,000, $130,000. And she's like, yeah, but I just don't have the time or money to do that. And I'm sitting there like, the numbers started chinging in my head, and I was like, I'm going to buy one of these and do it. And that's really how I started flipping, was bond foreclosures. I mean, HUD Home Store, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HomePath.com, all those websites, you could point your finger and make money almost. Yeah. I mean, it was insane.
What year was this?
This was in 13 or 14.
Yeah.
I mean, it was nuts. And I'm simplifying. I had a system.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, I can remember at one point, same thing. It was like, I would just skip a few. Like, I'm going to be traveling for the next few months, so I'm not even going to buy one. And I look back now, that's so stupid. But I had
you
a lot
had
of
to
fun.
do it to learn it.
Yeah, you gotta do it to learn it, and
Right.
like all great things come to an end. And that's just part of it.
This episode of Hustle on Purpose is brought to you by Arkansas Real Estate Buyers. If you have a problematic piece of real estate, we would love to help you. Go to the description, click on the link, schedule a free consultation with me personally, and we'll get you set up. Now let's get back to the show. You followed the template that I try to lay out in front of people. Is like, people will think, oh, it's a great time to flip a house. The market's hot, whatever. Or it's a great time to do whatever strategy. They watched a video or read a book, which is all great. But I'm like, you are not looking at enough deals. Almost nobody is.
Nobody is.
They're
I know
like,
I'm not.
Right. They're like, man, my neighbor's selling a house do you think, I think it's a good deal? It's like, well, you probably think it's a good deal because it's the one deal you've looked at.
Yeah.
And it's like, you need to find a way. I mean, even if I don't represent a lot of buyers, but I will if somebody wants me to because I have my license. The first thing I do is set them up. I'm like, what do you think your criteria are? Set them up on those MLS searches.
Yep. Get that instant email going.
Well, and I'm like, look at these look at everyone that comes through for the next 2 weeks before you even bother me with what you want to see, because most people just have no idea what's out there. No. They don't know a good deal when they see one. And that's not me ragging on them. That's just part of it.
There's so many times I can remember showing a buyer a house that they called on, and then they were like, well, I want to see some other ones. And they in my heart knowing this is the best house. Same thing, the opposite way. I was like, this is the best house you're going to get.
Yeah.
And I can remember after showing 30, 40 houses, they were like,
right.
Is that first one still available? I'm like, no, it's gone.
It's been gone. Right. Well, and some of that is why I'm not a great real estate agent, is because walking people through that process is tough for me because I've got a lot going on. I've got, and they can only see houses on nights and weekends. And it's like, dude, my Saturday mornings with my family are important to me. Yeah. It's hard for me to peel away from that when I know we're going to spend 3 minutes in that house and you're going to decide you don't like it.
The worst part is knowing it's a no before you give
it
a look.
It's like, as much as I like going to look at houses, I mean, I truly enjoy seeing houses and going and viewing properties and whatever. It's hard for me to swallow as an agent, and that's why I don't rely on that as like a income stream.
Yeah.
I admire people that can do it.
I know.
And I've been on the renovation side for so long that as an agent, you have to have the patience to walk people through, what it might cost to paint a house. But when somebody walks in a house and they're like, love everything about it, price is great, I can't handle the paint color, or I can't handle, I'm like, that's why they have stores devoted to selling paint. Literally there's an entire profession called painters that you can pay money to paint a house. But you can pick whatever color you want.
If we didn't have those people, though, we wouldn't be in the business, because people love move-in ready. They just love it.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thankful for it. That's why I'm a terrible agent.
I get it.
And that's what kept me out of real estate for a long time, because I've had an interest in real estate for a long time, but I was so naive to the ways to get involved in real estate. I'm a terrible commission-based salesperson just in general. Mm-hmm. And so I knew I wouldn't be a successful agent, and I thought that was the only way to get into real estate.
I mean, honestly, that's amazing, because most people, that's always the first thought process is, I'm going to become a real estate agent.
I'm going to become an agent.
And in all reality, in my opinion, that's the hardest way to make money, because it's a very saturated market. I mean, I think there's in Denver, because my brother was in Denver for a little while.
Oh, okay.
1 in 3, which he was there for 5 or 6 years, but 1 in 3 people in Denver have a real estate license.
Oh my gosh. Really?
I think that's the stat.
That's
now,
insane.
Don't quote me on that, but I think it was that high, where it's 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 or something have a real estate license. I mean, it was insanity, but
that's wild.
People, granted, if that didn't tell you a market's saturated in terms of competition, that's insane.
That is, it's insane. Yeah, that's the only word for it. That's wild.
But I mean, same thing. People look, it's okay, average price in Denver, I don't know, it's probably north of $500,000, be my guess.
Gotta be.
Look at, granted, no one sets commissions, but 2-3%, you're looking to clip. You do a few of those a year, and it's better than
it
doing
pays
something
for
else.
The license and the brokerage fees and whatever else you're paying for. Yeah. It especially, and I know you've experienced this the last couple of years, it's just been everybody wants or needs a side hustle. Yeah. And a lot of times people are like, I think being a real estate agent makes a lot of sense. I've been trying to talk a lot of people out of it, because I'm like, I just don't think the average person knows at all what it entails.
No.
To be a successful real estate agent is, I have a lot of respect for people, I mean, like your mom,
Dude,
that have made it in that business for a long time, because it's starting a business just like anything else, which most people just don't understand in general what that entails.
No. And I like, jokingly, it's like, even on the investment side, like, I'm realizing even now, like, how much you really have to spend on marketing if you really want to do volume. And I'm not even saying volume, but just how much you really, at this point in the real estate cycle, if you're still looking to get deals, you're going to have to spend some money. And granted, there may be some people that say, no, you don't have to spend anything. Well, please show me the system.
Let me know.
Let me know, because I'm all in.
I'll spend some money.
I'll spend some money to buy that system.
Right, yeah. I mean, and on the investment side, it's like people just think it's sunshine and rainbows. I mean, I think people sometimes will, I'll have a conversation with them and you can tell they think I'm just like Scrooge McDuck swimming in my pool of gold coins.
I know. And
it's like, dude, if you had any real idea, like how much, like it's the portfolio pays for itself every month. It's like we're having a good month, you know. 50, what I always tell people is like 50-year-old me is going to be really happy I'm doing what I'm doing today, but I don't want to give the illusion that like it's just spinning off so much extra cash flow that like I retired. I tell people that all the time, but people still don't get it. It's like, and I just closed on one, and this is like, dude, I've been doing it for a decade. It's in my niche market, a flip. I ended up not making any money. Like, I ran into some massive errors. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I spent 90 to 120 days on this deal. And granted, I'm not going there 40 hours a week.
Right. But it's a lot of risk,
but it's
financially.
It's still financial risk that ended up being a net zero when it's all said and done. And it's the same thing on the rental side. People, they see how much the rent is, but they don't understand that it's like property. You have property taxes, insurance, vacancy. People never talk, which I don't get why people never talk about it, but vacancy. Last year I had 3 sewer lines go out. I mean, just... And at
$5,000 to $8,000 a pop.
Yeah, it's like, roughly in those numbers. Luckily, Literock gives a little bit of a credit back, but then they pop you with their permit fee that's like $600, which I'm just like, okay, why don't you just reduce my $2,500 credit? Because well,
because they're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
That's like, exactly what they're doing every time.
It's a hard way to make an easy living, and I don't want to scare anybody off of real
100%.
estate investing, because it's dramatically improved my life, and
100%.
I get a lot of freedom from it, but I get to choose what 60 hours a week I work. Is like what that age-old saying. It's like same with being a real estate agent, whatever. It's like, you get a lot of freedom, but it's definitely not all sunshine and rainbows.
No, and I mean that's where like. The same thing, like, dude, I would encourage anyone and everyone to go into real estate in some form or fashion because of the freedom it provides. Are there like stressful times? 100%. Like, right. But it's just like choose your hard. People talk about choose your hard. Either you're either gonna have this or that, and that's part of life.
I just don't want. I want to simultaneously encourage people to get into real estate in some form, learn some niche, learn some opportunity, and try to seize it. But don't get into it thinking that you're going to be rich and famous day one. Because the pro and the con of real estate is it's great long term. If you are getting into it for immediate financial benefits, you're going to have a bad time.
100%.
It's just part of it. But if you want security long-term, it's outstanding. I mean, all the work that I'm putting in now is for the betterment of my family in the future. I'm trying to plant the trees now that will provide shade for my family 30 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Is all I'm doing. I'm trying to keep the lights on along the way.
And it's like, I can remember, like, I've had times where it's like, sometimes I've overplanted, and
Yeah.
the cash flow management.
It's tough, man.
I'm very optimistic, and I think a lot of people that get into real estate
You have to be.
You have to be, or you're not going to make it.
Right.
But there's definitely been some times where I've overplanted, and I needed a harvest and not new seeds in the ground.
Right. Yeah, 100%. There's those planting seasons and harvest seasons. I had another real estate investor tell me one time, he calls it meat and pasta seasons. He's like, those harvest seasons would be like the steak, the meat, and the planting seasons would be, the pasta or the rice.
Right.
He's like, man, I'd come home and tell my wife, like, hey, we're going to be in a pasta and rice season for a little bit. Or I'd come home and tell my wife, all right, we're having steaks tonight. And it's like, I empathize with that a lot.
Yes.
My wife has heard that exact phrase from me several times. And, if you're lucky enough, like you've been in this for a decade, in my experience, at least, granted, I have a great wife and family. You build a bit of a track record where it's like, and they can have that comfort in, okay, like, the pasta and rice season won't last forever. Yep. We need to ride it out for a little bit, and the steak will come back on the menu one day.
It will. I can even remember, like, the first time I quote had a dry spell, and it was right when I realized that my old way of doing business was gone, and that was using all the foreclosure sites essentially.
Yeah.
And I can remember just getting on there one day, and I was like, I'm just going to get me a new deal. And there weren't any. And I can remember thinking, what in the world am I going to do now? Because, like, that had been my primary source of income. I'd had a bunch of low-end apartments, and I'd sold all those.
Yeah.
And so, essentially, I was just back to retail flips. We'll just call them flips. Like, retail sales or one source of income, no recurring revenue. And
the flips are risky, and they're not immediate. And you have your money sunk for a little bit. Yep. That can be really, like, that being your main source of income can be really stressful.
It was right before we got married, and luckily I had reserves, but I can remember going like almost 16 months without actually making anything.
Yeah.
And that was when I actually kind of like refocused and realized, like, okay, not everything stays the same, and I need to continue to evolve. And that's actually when I ended up moving downtown, because I just thought there like would be a new niche downtown, which there ended up being. Hallelujah. But I bought a bunch of stuff downtown, and that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made.
Yeah.
And I basically just flipped off. Same thing though. I ended up flipping off all those properties over a 4 or 5 year period. But I think that's the other thing, is like just remembering that even in real estate, that is such a constant business. Like it's been the same for thousands of years, or at least a few hundred years.
A long time.
But it still changes constantly. I can even think of dear Lord, just the last few years have been insanity.
Crazy.
Trying
to keep up with what's going on has just been crazy.
Yeah. And then, like, I can remember where there was a point where I knew neighborhoods, a market analysis. Like, I didn't have to run a market analysis. I didn't have to run comps. I know what the comps are. And then it went from like, okay, that neighborhood's about the same for years. And then it was like every 6 months it was changing.
Yeah.
Where I was like, okay, I'm off, not by a little, I'm off by a ton. And I missed the deal because I didn't spend a little more time realizing this neighborhood has changed.
Yeah. It's been so hard to keep up, and it's been a really scary time for things like flips, because you'll hit some out of the park. All of a sudden that neighborhood's worth a ton more, and the demand's there, and
from when you start to finish. I mean,
people are just throwing money at you. You got offers coming in like crazy, all the way to, you have one drag out a little too long and the interest rates just keep climbing and area dries up and like you're just like, man, I'm making no money or losing money. Because making no money is losing money.
It is, because your time is
Right,
money.
yeah.
So you spend a bunch of time on something, or you end up getting a bad sub that stretches you thin or steals from you, or maybe doesn't directly steal from you, but indirectly get you.
Yeah, real estate, if done well, I mean, one of the things that's helped me sleep at night with like the amount of debt that I have on properties that I have and stuff like that is, if it's done well, it's really tough to lose money. Yeah. But I have broken even on some deals, and that my worst deals are deals I've broken even on like the balance sheet at the end of the day. Yep. But in your heart, it's like, man, I really lost some money on that thing.
Yeah, but it's like if you're breaking even, like when I finished out because I use Excel, I probably should use it. But anyway, when I finished out Excel spreadsheet and I had everything lined up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't make a dime on this deal. That was painful.
It hurts. It hurts. Yeah. But, lessons learned, and you're better for it. But
well, I mean, that's where it's like, looking back, the best things that ever occurred in my life were typically problems or challenges, because that's the only place you do learn. I mean, if every deal had just went rosy and perfect, I'd never learn a thing. I'd be at the same place I was 10 years ago.
Yep. Absolutely.
You're not going to learn a thing unless you make mistakes, and if you're not making mistakes, then you're probably not doing anything. You're not doing any deals. I can tell you right now.
Yeah, the thing I'm most thankful for about the real estate investment company I used to work for is they were doing so much volume. Yeah. And especially when you're dealing with single family residential houses, they're all different. Every plot's different. Every house is different. You have to get those reps in, deal with all kinds of different houses, layout plans, contractors,
the learning curve
neighborhoods
that you got from that.
Right.
I mean, you couldn't put a number on it.
Right.
I promise.
Yeah, you just can't. There's no replacement for all the different repetitions and all of that.
That's where my side came from, the sell side. And so like when I started flipping, dude, I didn't know how to change a doorknob, didn't know what it cost or how long it took.
Right.
But the beauty is in those 2 years with my mom, I had so many reps. At the time, we were going on 5 to 7 seller consultations a week.
Right.
Week after week after week, and sometimes 2 a day. And just the amount of reps, it's like just the same thing. So on the amount of reps, it's like every house we'd go in, she'd be like, as soon as we left, she'd like, you saw how that kitchen was laid out? That right there is going to hurt them on the sell. Or, okay, you saw on the outside the slope. She's like, that's going to knock off 5% off the price. Or just those little things that help you evaluate what a home will sell for.
And all those conversations with homeowners as well, and like their different situations and how you overcome that on a sale. And
my mom was huge on scripts and presentation. And so like, she had her quote soft closes built in. And like by the time I started about halfway in, a year in, I started going on the appointments without her. But by then, it's like I could have my eyes closed and go through that presentation. And
be prepared and have that confidence that gives... Because most of those buyers, sellers you're dealing with, they might buy a few houses in their lifetime.
And homeownership average years going up every year. When my mom started the business, it was like 6 years, and I think it's over 10 now. How long somebody stays in a home.
Right. We've got people now that are like golden handcuffed to their house, right? Like if you refinanced at 2.78%, you're not going anywhere.
No.
Well, you're going to go
leave. I would never leave.
Right. You're going to go buy a new house at 8%? Absolutely not. Like, no. Yeah. So I think, that trend's going to continue going that way, because why would people leave?
My brother, we were talking earlier about him. doing his farming, but he had bought around 2020. He'd bought a 3 acres or so up in Greenbrier on his house. And when he started expanding his farm, he was like, okay, we want more land. We're looking to probably get like 15 to 20 and maybe build. And then I was like, man, have you run the numbers? And he's like, what do you mean?
What numbers?
And it was like, well, I was like, just to buy the same house you're in, your payment's almost going to be double right now. So he's like, we're staying put. He ended up just drilling a well, did a lot of infrastructure work, and then so he wouldn't have to buy, he's leasing land from his neighbor.
Yeah.
And that works perfect. And I mean, I was like, man, it doesn't matter what you spend on that lease. It's going to be 20 times cheaper than you going out and trying to buy and build at the very second for what he has.
Right. Especially with a startup business. So your brother's Dirk. Shout out to Dirk. Especially when you're starting a business, it's like, how do you make it as low risk, low overhead as possible to get it off the ground?
Yeah, I mean, it's even like, so he has a farm store on the front of his property because he's trying to move more inventory.
Yeah.
And I can remember just thinking like, oh my gosh, Derek, please do not build a shop on the front of your property to sell lettuce. Because he's a farmer. He sells. Yeah. It's not labeled, quote, he doesn't have organic certification, but it's he does a type of regenerative farming, which is about the highest end produce you could possibly buy. Yeah. And he was trying to move more product. So anyway, though, to lower some risk, he ended up buying a building.
Mm-hmm. Like a pre-made
building. And so he's like, worst case, if this doesn't work, I can sell the building, right, and recoup some of my costs, which turns out it's a wild success. So, and it ended up doing really well. That's so amazing, now it's glad he's doing it. But man, I was nervous for him because.
And now that it's a big success and you grow it, and maybe that leads into buying the property.
100%.
I like hearing 100%. That more than just dumping all of your literal eggs in one basket.
Being a farmer and raising chickens.
Right. I am. I'm excited. So do you participate at all in the farming, or you just eat the?
Man, I participate by supporting him and eating all the good food.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
But his alone's been a cool story because like he's kind of flirted back and forth with real estate, but in all reality, it probably isn't like his passion. Right. When he was in the ministry up in Denver, for whatever reason, he had just gotten really interested in a plant-based diet. And so Denver's super expensive, but he ended up originally growing microgreens in his little bedroom that he lived in. But then he got in Denver where he was at. It was in Old Town specifically. There was like this 5-acre plot, and all these people were like, it was like a little association,
a community garden,
but like very high end. Anyway, he fell in love with it. He probably had like a 10 by 20, spot that, quote, was his. Right. But he fell in love with it and wanted to get into farming and sell to restaurants in Denver. Yeah. Well, that was right when he got married. And so he ended up selling part of his ownership in some real estate that my family had. And he moved a little bit outside of Denver into a house that had like a gigantic 1.5-acre backyard. Nice. And so he bought some chickens, started doing it. Well, he put all his eggs in one basket, and it just like we all do, we sometimes will underestimate what it'll take to get a business going. Yeah. And so
it's hard to approximate.
It's hard to approximate, especially when you've never done it. Yeah. And so anyway, he actually tried to start a farm up in Denver, and it just didn't work out. He couldn't get the revenue going with the cost of land to farm in Denver. Yeah, which was insane. I don't even want to tell you how much because you'd be like, how in the world?
I can't imagine how many eggs you'd have to sell or heads of lettuce you'd have to sell.
A lot. Just to break even.
I mean, people want to rag. I do think there's a lot of issues with how our food is made. But you look at it as a business.
As a business.
And it makes a lot of sense on why they shove 10,000 chickens
Dirk
on top of themselves.
Literally spending, and dude, he's hand planting. And granted, this is not your
right.
This is not large scale agriculture. This is like a very small farm.
Right.
Everything's done by hand.
Grown with love.
It's grown with love. There's no pesticides. Like, I mean, this is some high end stuff. Let's put it that way.
Right.
But I mean, he spends probably 20 to 30 hours a week with his hands, either planting, picking, tending.
Yeah.
Just to the actual like the farming part, and then his chickens are a whole nother thing. But we're talking a lot of man hours, a lot of man hours.
Yeah, I believe it. And then on top of that, like that's working in his business.
Yes.
Then he also has to work on the business.
100%.
And they offer delivery and like running all the products around. And but I do think we're in a place now where people are starting to realize the importance of having food like that, and it's not readily available.
No.
And I'm hoping that, because of that, people are willing to pay him well for it.
Dude, it's crazy the demand. Cause so anyway, he basically every Thursday sends out his list of what available products. And my mom and I he texts us the list. So she sent out a list. He puts the stuff in the farm store on Thursday, sends out his list on Thursday. Well, between Thursday and this morning, some of the stuff had already, like, people just bum rushed his shop, and they bought it all. And
which is good.
Which is amazing.
Right.
But it's like, my mom was like, I was really looking forward to that. And it's like, why didn't you grab it? And he's like, well, I go grab it Friday before I make the delivery.
Right. Yeah. If you want it, Mom, you've got to show up on Thursday evenings.
Well, that's where it's like, he's in Greenbrier. My mom's not driving to Greenbrier because she lives downtown. But it was just hilarious because it's like, there's a demand. There's a huge demand. And the other part is that's crazy is like, because you're buying direct, is it probably a little bit more expensive? It is. But if you look at the numbers, it's actually not that much more expensive because you're cutting out the middleman. You're cutting out the grocery store. And so he's able to charge enough that he's able to have margin, but also provide an extremely high quality product.
That's great. The I think it was like the CEO of Chick-fil-A or something, but he basically had a quote that I like, and it said, if your product or service is good enough, the market will demand that you grow.
Yep.
And so it sounds like, I mean, through y'all's like entrepreneurial like upbringing and through Dirk learning some of the lessons with like his first farm, it's great to hear that it sounds like, he hasn't given up on that, and he's finding ways to do it better.
Yeah.
And now to hear that he might be at that place now where it's like the market's literally demanding for him to grow. I'm excited to see or at least hear about if he's able to kind of make it over those next hurdles.
The next hurdles,
because there's always like each level of business, you just run into those new hurdles.
You have to.
Right. And it's one of the things that makes that journey so exciting and great.
It is.
But I'm always thinking about, okay, feel like I've kind of made it to this new plateau. What are those hurdles that have to be overcome to get to that like next level? So it's like Dirk's business may, and I think the book's called Traction, where it kind of talks about this. It's an outstanding book, but it's not. None of this is really reinventing the wheel, right? It's like there are these levels that are pretty clearly defined. It's like Dirk's probably getting to that point where it's like, okay, well, in order to grow this, we need these three things. It's more land, more hands helping.
Time. Yeah.
Right. Well, he's going to have to multiply himself.
He's already on that point.
Yeah.
Yes, he's there.
And that's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Trying to come up with systems, processes, whatever, find the right person that is willing to take on trying to become Dirk number 2.
Yep.
And then Dirk's got to figure out how to transpose a lot of his knowledge into that person.
Yeah, and the same. It's just cool how it translates into multiple businesses because also just like real estate, there's a ton of different like little sub markets that you can like. He's starting to plant fruit, and so it's a longer term thing. It's kind of seasonal.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's starting.
The trees, I'm sure, take a long time to grow.
Yeah, and trees are years. He's doing more like bushes, so he's going to do like strawberries and blackberries.
Oh man, I'll buy him out of strawberries.
Yeah, and so anyway, just he's been going to other experts. Like he's got a guy that's mentoring him out of Nashville that runs a gigantic farm, and he's like, you kind of got to pick your niches, but expanding those and continuing to add on when you have the investment is just like real estate, it's the same thing of
and you can have just like real estate. It's funny because I've never made this connection, but like your apple trees are your long-term buy and holds, maybe your potatoes are your fix and flips, right? Like you grow them once in the ground and then you sell them, and you only get as many potatoes as you put in the ground, right? I
got to tell you the craziest thing though. Okay, so we'd gone down to see Tony Robbins in November, down in West Palm Beach. Me and Derek went down there to do his conference, one of his conferences. Well, anyway, Derek's got another guy that he knows down there, and so he's like, when we land in West Palm, can we go visit this farmer? Which I'm thinking, sure, whatever. We get grabbing the Uber. It's like an hour north. We're in the country.
Right. And as farms typically are.
As farms typically are.
Out there.
Yeah, they're just out there. And so the Uber drops us off. And then I'm thinking, are we going to be able to get an Uber back to town? Because we are, like, I barely have signal out here. But anyway, this guy's got us set up. He's selling his lettuce, his short-term crops. He's got, he also runs a nursery. Nursery business was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. He's got trees.
Flowers and...
No, he's got these little mini, like, exotic fruit trees. Can't remember what they are, but I literally left there full because he had, like, a different bunch of varieties. These things take years and years to grow.
Right.
And he's got them, you can just tell, like, he's not worried about selling them because they need the money.
Right.
Because every year they grow a little bit.
Well, and the bigger ones sell for more money.
They sell for more money. Oh, my God.
They're just sitting there appreciating.
This little tiny tree right here is $500, and this little tiny tree is $1,000. And I'm like, I'm looking around on his 10-acre plot, and they're just everywhere.
You're just, the math starts adding up. Yeah.
Yeah, the numbers start churning. And I'm like, but the craziest
And he's got acres
Acres.
outside of West Palm Beach.
Yes.
That's, I imagine, isn't inexpensive.
But it was nuts because it's like he had this weird little niche. It's like, this is an exotic fruit tree, blah, 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 which... They don't grow here in Arkansas because Derek was wanting to bring them back.
Right.
I can't even remember. It was like I cannot remember the name, but it was the most unique fruit. It was like out of South America.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, people love these in Florida, and we get them going where they can produce fruit, and then they'll buy them for, Anyway, it was nuts. But it's just the weirdest niche. I don't think that's the other thing that was nuts. It's like, I guarantee he's the only seller of these trees, probably in a 2,000-mile radius.
Right.
Would be my guess. But.
Yeah, and I've never made that connection, but it's like they're literally assets that he invested in, he's sitting there and he's shepherding them.
It's exactly right.
But they're sitting there and appreciating in value, and they produce fruit along the way. I mean, it's just like a long-term buy and hold. Like you get the fruit along the way, but really, like at some point, he's going to sell that tree for a payday, and it's really interesting. I'd never made that connection. That's really cool.
That's where when I was there, I was like, Derek's like eating up like how everything's laid out because like anyway, the guy had a food for us, and that's
the farming knowledge.
Right. And I'm just sitting there thinking like, oh my gosh, every one of these trees is clipping between 100 and 1,000, and they're stretching in every direction as far as my eyes can see.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's good to have both perspectives, right? Like to have the, I mean, y'all are kind of like the property brothers on HGTV. Like one of them's got to have, look at things through one lens, and one of them's got to look at them through another. But combined, you get kind of
you get both
product of both. Yeah. Well, I'm really glad to hear that Dirk's doing well. I haven't talked to him in a long time, probably since high school, but. Yeah, glad to hear that that's going well for him. What one of the things that I love to ask people, and I'm sure that since you've been in the business for so long, is if they have any crazy stories.
Man.
Too many to think of.
Yeah.
Well, normally people have some, but they're like, well, I can't tell that one because that person's going to definitely know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You can
Definitely some crazy stuff. I mean, on a random note, I've got a vacant property that I just kicked some homeless people out of yesterday,
Really?
which was a little crazy, but it's now boarded up pretty good, so hopefully they're not going to be back. But that was my most recent story, literally yesterday.
So you had to go in, like, what, did you just go in there
The cops called me. So they got them out, but I think they came right back.
Yeah.
Because the doors were like, the cops closed all the doors and the doors were wide open again. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So I don't know if I scared them off again when I got there.
Yeah.
But hopefully they're not going to come back.
Yeah. Hope not. Yeah. And hopefully if they are there, hopefully they're just like sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't want any people burning down that property either. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Crazy stories.
The joys of real estate investing.
I know, man.
I always say nothing good ever happens at a vacant house.
No, it doesn't. It dilapidates too. That's
Right.
the craziest part. Is like how fast a house breaks down when it's vacant.
Oh yeah. Well, and yeah, just nothing good happens.
No.
Like even if you don't have somebody getting under it and trying to steal copper, or dude, I had a house. This was very recently. Somebody. All the plumbing was like PEX, it's plastic, right? But somebody had gotten under there and they had turned all the breakers off, but they were trying to steal the electrical wiring.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, really? Like, you know how much wiring you have to like go turn in for scraps to get anything out of it? A ton. And so it looks like while they were down there with like some kind of saw, and they cut the electrical wiring, but then they also cut into one of the PEX pipes.
Yeah.
So you can tell where they stopped because I'm pretty sure it just started gushing water all over them. And I'm just like, thank God they turned the breaker off. Because like if they had been sawing through a dryer cable,
and the water hits,
and dousing themselves while laying in a crawl space, like we would have shown up to a crime scene.
There's no telling.
Like there just would have been a dead guy in the crawl space, like looking like the cat in Christmas Vacation, chewing on the wire under the seat. There's just like an imprint of the cat. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I'm like, just at least they were smart enough to turn the breakers off.
Yeah.
As bad as I don't want people under my house stealing wire, I also don't want them permanently injured.
Yeah.
But there's always stuff like that. You'll have that.
Yeah, it's just part of it.
And as part of, so this, we'll just transition into this real quick. So part of the issue that I have with all these big out-of-state funds buying just massive amounts of properties is they'll come in and they'll buy just a ton of houses without having any of the structure in place to renovate and manage those properties. Like they'll be like, oh, well, we've got, however many millions of dollars of capital
trying to move money, man,
that have to get allocated. So we're just going to gobble up everything.
I know.
But then I know the people working for them in Little Rock, and they'll just be like, dude, I've got 150 houses sitting vacant right now with nobody working on them, nothing going on. And
I mean, that's insane to me. I can't even fathom it. I really can't.
And they're just like, we've got 2 project managers. We're gonna hire some vendors to work on them when we can. But the main thing for them is like, we got our capital allocated. The houses are bought. We'll renovate them when we can, but they'll just sit there vacant and be, just be hotspots for drugs and all kinds of nefarious activities. And yeah, it's wild. A couple of those have, I don't know if I should name them or not, but they've.
Yeah, you don't need to name them. Just let them be.
Yeah, they've
let them do their thing.
They've moved on because they bought.
Right.
They. I think a lot of them just drastically underestimate what it takes to build that business in a new market.
I know.
And they're like, the easy and the fun part is buying the deals.
100%. That's my favorite part because all you have is optimism.
Right.
At least if you're optimistic.
Great. Right.
Everything looks rosy and you've already ran your numbers knowing exactly what you're going to make.
Yep. How quick you're going to get it done.
And it's going to be fast.
Yep. And they're doing the same things. I mean, it's just like Zillow offers and having to lay off half their people and losing $400 billion or whatever it was. It's like, it's all fun and games behind your computer, looking at your spreadsheets and your numbers.
Yep.
But it's like everybody's got a game plan to like get punched in the mouth, right?
Yep.
When it comes down to it, and the doing needs doing, a lot of those plans just fall apart.
I know.
And we're left as the people that live in the communities with these areas that have just been bought up by some faceless, out-of-state investment company that has no real interest in like how the neighborhood does.
On some of my listings, I actually say, believe it or not, that like, are you tired of out-of-state landlords? Because for that exact reason, like even on the tenant side, some people are literally tired of it. Yeah. Because they're never going to get an answer when they need anything fixed. Mm-hmm. And like, obviously I can't make, in all reality, like it's hard to make quote a unit perfect. Let's just be real. Even a brand new construction home may have 20, 30 flaws. Oh yeah. But most of the time I do everything I can. I'll bend over backwards to make sure that they have a good experience. Yeah. I always tell like the same thing of like, if my mom was living in this unit, would I do this for her? Mm-hmm. And I really do try to live by that, but yeah, man, it's craziness for the ones that literally just buy up everything and then there's no way to manage it. No. And it sounds great on paper. I mean, we all know a lot of things sound great on paper. Right. For the same reason of like, well, these numbers work the same as a big apartment complex, and we know that's just not the case. Right. I mean, there's 150, instead of 150 doors on one piece of property, you got 150 doors scattered over 50 with, 150 different roofs and termite policies or just, whatever it is, insurance, taxes. I mean, it's madness. The management's way harder. It's way harder. You can't just have one person sit in an office like you could at an apartment complex. No. Yeah. And I do think it matters to people. A lot of renters feel like they're throwing money away. Yeah. That's kind of like how it's painted. There are days that I wish I was a renter. Me too. I get it. Because of all the joys of home ownership. Yep. But I do think it makes a difference to people. It would to me, with the knowledge that I have at least, to know that my rent dollars are going to stay in this like local economy. If you pay your local landlord, that money is going to local vendors, probably to a local bank, and it stays in that baseball team ecosystem. Yes, right. 100%. Yeah. Local schools, like whatever it is. Yeah. I saw a meme the other day. I wish I had it pulled up. I'll have to send it to Aaron so he can put it on the screen. But it was like, it was like a picture of a tweet, and the guy was like, I just realized that I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and my landlord's also living my paycheck to my paycheck. Because it was like he had a text from his landlord that was like, hey, you normally have your rent deposited by like 8 a.m. today, and it's 3 p.m. Like, are you still going to have it deposited today? Because he was like, the landlord was like, ended up saying something like, I have to make the mortgage payment today. Yeah. It's like, today, man, and I don't have the money. I felt all of that like to the bottom of my soul. Like, it's like realizing my landlord's also is living my paycheck to paycheck. It's like, yes, preach. Like, it's a reality. Yeah. I was laughing because I mean it's the same thing, like, over planning. It's like, man, liquidity and access to capital. You may have and that's I learned on one of my quote times of like, I can have all the equity in the world, but if you don't have any cash or access to cash, you're screwed. You are screwed. Just to be vulnerable for a minute, like that's part of why I've slowed down buying recently, and I think
why. I mean, the Fed's accomplishing what they're trying to accomplish with the rate increases and
100%.
whatever. The stagnation that we're having now, I'm playing a part in that, because normally the way my business works and how I acquire more long-term rentals is I buy value-add deals.
Yep.
Through the equity I create in those deals, I'll refinance cash back out. That
Yep.
cash can then go to keep the machine running,
Yep.
so to speak. Well, at a certain interest rate, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to keep refinancing that money back out, which is
Yep.
kind of where we're at now.
Yep.
So this is a season of patience for me. And Andy Frisilla calls it aggressive patience, is what I try to live by. It's like, okay, well, in those seasons of patience, I'm working on my business instead of just working in it. The working in my business demands have slowed down. So now it's, what can I do to work on it to be more prepared for market changes in the future?
Yeah, I mean, right now I've been a net seller for the year. Still been flipping, but also selling some stuff that's like, hey, does this really make sense? And then also looking at my current holds and just trying how to max those out. I mean, that's really what I've done this year.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. You have to have those periods of, I'm more inclined to be focused on growth and the shiny things. I really have to make sure that I focus on shepherding what I have now in the best way that I can.
I mean, and I've spent some money on which, talking about crazy stories, I feel like that whole property has just been a crazy story. But I've just been focusing on improving it, because I'm like, dude, there's margin in this deal. And this is a property I already own. I've owned it for 4 or 5 years now.
It's been a rental for you?
It's a little apartment building.
Yeah.
And I'm like, anyway, it's one of those where it's like, dude, there's still a lot of improvement, a lot of value that I have yet to tap into in this building. And so that's been one of the things that I've been doing. But when I bought it, in all reality, it had a bunch of druggies in it.
Yeah.
And hadn't been improved in. I mean, we didn't even have panels on this thing.
Druggies that pay their rent?
No. No rent paying druggies. Unfortunately and sadly, the one guy that I knew was solid in the building, he died the first month I was there. So I knew I was at a complete zero on my quote revenue. So I spent the next 6 months just getting everyone out. I mean, it was just, there was one guy that was good, but, anyway, it was just one of those. And then since then, the building's been hit twice by cars because it's on a major thoroughfare. Twice. I'm not kidding you. It's been hit twice. And then I own the building next door and the building next to that. They've both been hit once.
Statistically, how is that even
possible? Dude, I don't know.
possible?
So what's even crazier, the craziest thing is, I have a few rentals in the Heights. Mm-hmm. One of them is right across from the Kroger on Cantrell.
Awesome.
And then I have another one on the other side by Forest Park Elementary. It's not, Cantrell's straight right here. It's not on the street. It's off the street. Mm-hmm. Last year, about this time, somehow someone managed to swerve on the road and hit this house. Dude, this house is not, it's on the straight part of Cantrell. And my tenants called me and they're like, hey, something's happened. I'm like, okay, what's going on? They're like, someone hit the house. I'm like, how? They even avoided a tree, a car parked, and swerved past a rock to hit the corner of the house. And I can just tell you that was a nightmare because I had to rebuild from the foundation up because it hit some electrical, it hit HVAC, it took out my foundation wall, had to reframe, took out 2 windows. It was a nightmare.
Bro.
It was a nightmare. But yeah, so in the last 3 years, I've actually dealt with 5 wrecks that have hit my property. 5 wrecks.
5.
That's... I statistically, I'm like, I don't even know how this is possible.
Right.
Because some of the wrecks, I'm like, how did you even get that car there?
Right.
I mean, it was nuts.
dude, I don't mean to laugh at your pain. I'm just like, I'm trying to, I've dealt with a significant amount of rentals, and I've only ever had one hit by a car, and really they just hit the outside condenser unit.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like I've had 2 of them literally cause no damage.
Right.
I mean, they hit the house and the bricks were scuffed up. But I mean, one of them took the whole front out of the property. Like it took out basically like a double front porch, balconies. And of course, none of these people had not a single one has had insurance. Not a single one. So it's just been a complete nightmare. I actually, on one of them, they did, but they had state minimum, and it didn't even cover. It was like $50,000 worth of damage. And basically, I just took the state minimum. I didn't want to file. I'm thinking back now, I should have filed with my insurance, but I was just like, I don't want my premiums going up. And I took the state minimum, and I just basically took the whole front porch off the house. And so now it doesn't have a porch, but I was able to rebuild it for a little over $25,000. But
Yeah.
I mean, legitimately, I've had 5 wrecks in the last 3 years.
Dude. There was
The one in the Heights was the craziest because, like, we're on a straight road. They avoid a car. They avoid a tree.
and other houses.
And other houses, then hit mine. I mean, it was just
Right.
like, how did you even get to
like
this
a
location?
heat-seeking missile.
It literally, like, there would be no other way than heat-seeking missile
Like
to hit that house.
You got people out for you, man.
I know, man. I do laugh though,
That's
because
Zeke's house.
oh my gosh, yeah, those are definitely probably my. I mean, we've got the typical,
Yeah.
tenant trashes the place.
Yeah.
I could go on and on for those
Yeah.
stories, but the craziest ones are probably my car stories because I don't even know how it's possible. Like,
That's a shocking number of wrecks into a.
we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so yeah, we got 6. Yeah.
There was a point where I had 3 house fires. They were all in North Little Rock.
Oh my
And they
gosh.
were in like a 16-month time span.
Now that's insane.
And I was like, the third one came around. Really, the two of them were related. It was 2
Yeah.
houses next to each other. Fire
Yeah.
started at one, it spread to the other one. The second fire happened, and I'm like, dude, at what point does North Little Rock
Yeah.
start thinking that I'm burning my own
you're
houses
committing
down?
arson. Yeah,
Right.
Well,
I'm like,
that's-
I'm really starting to get nervous. I had nothing to do with it, obviously, but you do start to have those thoughts of like at what point is your insurance company going to start thinking you're wrecking cars into your own houses?
well, that's where it's like I only filed with one, and that was the one in the Heights because I was like, I'm not paying for this.
Yeah.
And I need this done. I need it done right, and I gotta get this done. And
yeah.
luckily, the one that was the porch, which caused like $50,000 in true damage, I was just like, but this dude was 18. It was like his 18th birthday when this occurred. Like he went out with his buddies, so they wrecked at like 1 a.m. And I literally just made a choice. I was like, I can rebuild this for $25,000, or I can ruin this dude's life.
Yeah.
And in that case, I just chose not to because I was like, I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference for me having those porches. And I know if I do, like this kid's deep shit. Let's just tacking on another lawsuit onto him. I don't think it's going to help him very much.
Yeah. Shout out to those people that didn't ruin my life that could have when I was a teenager.
Dude,
You
yes. Yeah, many a times.
I'll try to pass that forward to some.
Hopefully that
teenager
comes
one
back
day.
around at some point.
Yeah. I have a few people a few incidents I still need to pay it forward for from my teenage years. So
100%.
props to you for looking out for the kid. You probably didn't need it to go any worse. So last question I like to ask people is, so if you could go back in time in any point in time and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be? I know it's kind of like you just throw you into a deep question.
Yeah, that's a really deep question. I
like to end on a positive note.
Yeah.
What's the meaning of life?
Yeah, the only thing is I'd probably, especially at this point in my life is really just like go for it and don't think about it so much.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of times I overthink things or try to overanalyze them.
Yeah, that analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
Let the thinking get in the way.
Yeah.
That and like buy Bitcoin in like 07.
Yeah, especially that
never
one.
sell it.
Or Apple, Netflix,
Any of them.
whatever it is.
Buy whatever you want in 07 and sell it in 2022.
It was like Bank of America stock. You know, it went down to like 10 cents because they thought they were going bankrupt, or everyone did.
Yeah.
And I actually know somebody that did buy a bunch of it. They knew they're not going to let Bank of America, because people actually thought it was like the Bank of America.
Right. The name is worth a lot.
Yeah. They were literally like, they're not the Fed and the government's not going to let the Bank of America fail. And
That's
so they
smart.
actually bought a bunch of stock in it. And
that's smart.
Anyway.
Yeah. You
Exactly.
Just forever buy the dip. Just always have money available for the dip. This is great advice.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming
Enjoyed
out.
it.
Really appreciate you dropping a bunch of real estate investment experience and knowledge on everybody. If you want people to find you, how do they do that?
Man, they can go online on Facebook, Instagram, all those things. And
Yeah. Zeke Tanner.
honestly, I couldn't even tell you what it is. It might be Zeke Tanner, Tanner Realty, but
Yeah.
it's one or the other.
Yeah. Well, I think people can benefit from reaching out to you because you've got you can help people with buying or selling real estate, and
I've made a lot of mistakes over the years, so I can definitely help some people on that side. Hopefully, not do the same thing I did.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Experience matters, and it's important.
Yeah.
You can find people to help you bypass some of those hurdles yourself, then you're better off for it.
Yeah.
So thank you all for watching. This has been the Hustle on Purpose podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, share it with anybody that may need this information. Reach out to Zeke with any of your local Central Arkansas real estate needs. Go buy some healthy food from Dirk Tanner as well.
Let's go.
Remember to hustle on purpose. Thanks.